Simone, an ambitious college freshman, arrives in a new country, eager to start her university journey. But her excitement turns into a nightmare when customs officials falsely accuse her of smuggling and detain her. Without legal representation or contact with the outside world, she quickly realizes she isn't being processed for a crime. She's being taken. Simone stepped off the plane, rolling the stiffness out of her shoulders. The hours spent squeezed into an economy seat had left her limbs aching, but excitement pushed the discomfort aside. She was finally here. After years of dreaming, months of planning, and the grueling flight, she had arrived at the start of her new life. The airport hummed with energy. Voices blended together in a mix of languages. Suitcases rumbled across polished floors, and the cool air carried the scent of coffee and disinfectant. Signs pointed travelers in different directions: baggage claim, immigration, customs. Simone adjusted her backpack and followed the steady stream of passengers toward the customs line. The line moved quickly. Passengers ahead of her handed over their passports, answered a question or two, and were waved through. Simone watched a man in a gray suit nod at the officer before grabbing his luggage and disappearing into the terminal. A family with two young children passed without issue. Her turn was next. Stepping forward, she slid her passport across the counter. The officer, a middle-aged man with pale blue eyes and a stiff posture, picked it up and studied it. The moment stretched longer than it should have. His gaze flicked between her face and the document. "Purpose of visit?" he asked. His voice was clipped, each syllable landing with precision. "I'm starting university. Freshman year," Simone replied. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he ran a finger over the passport's edge, tapping it twice. Then, without looking at her, he raised a hand and motioned to someone behind her. "Step aside," he said. "Additional screening." Simone blinked. "Wait, what?" Step aside." His tone left no room for argument. A uniformed officer appeared at her elbow, a silent presence guiding her away from the main line. Heat rose in Simone's chest, a mix of confusion and unease. Her grip tightened on the strap of her backpack as she followed them through a side door into a smaller, windowless room. A single metal table sat in the center. A second officer, younger than the first but just as rigid, stood waiting. His badge read Richards. He barely acknowledged her before reaching for her suitcase. "Put your bag on the table," he ordered. Simone hesitated. "Can someone tell me what's going on?" "I didn't do anything wrong." Neither officer answered. The first, his badge read Donovan, folded his arms and leaned against the wall while Richards unzipped her suitcase. She swallowed the urge to protest as he rifled through her carefully packed belongings. Books, folded clothes, a pair of sneakers, a toiletry bag. He took his time, lifting each item, shaking out her jeans as if something might be hidden in the pockets. "This is ridiculous," Simone muttered under her breath. Her fingers curled into her palms. Richards didn't stop. He reached deeper into the suitcase, fingers pressing against the lining. Then, without warning, he pulled out a small, vacuum-sealed package. The air in the room shifted. Donovan straightened. "Care to explain this?" he asked, holding up the package between two fingers. His voice carried something new, something sharp. Simone stared. "I don't. I've never seen that before." The package was tightly wrapped, its contents impossible to see. It didn't belong to her. She had packed this suitcase herself, checked it before leaving home. How had it ended up in her bag? "That's not mine," she said firmly. "I swear I don't know what that is." Donovan exhaled through his nose. "That's what they all say. I'm telling the truth. I packed my own bag. Someone must have." Richards cut her off. "You're in serious trouble. Smuggling contraband into this country? That's a federal offense." Simone's stomach turned. "Smuggling? No, that's a mistake. Please, let me call my university. They can confirm who I am. Or a lawyer." Donovan shook his head. "That's not how this works." Her pulse thudded in her ears. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. Every nerve in her body screamed that this was wrong, but the way the officers looked at her, the certainty in their eyes, made it clear they had already decided she was guilty. Richard set the package down on the table with an air of finality. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. The distant hum of the airport beyond the door seemed unreal, like another world she had been cut off from. "You have one chance to tell us the truth," Donovan said, his voice steady, almost bored. "Where did you get this? Who gave it to you?" Simone's hands clenched at her sides. "I told you. I don't know. I've never seen that before in my life." Donovan exchanged a look with Richards. Something unspoken passed between them. Then he turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "Sit down. We're going to be here for a while." The chair beneath Simone was hard, the metal edges pressing into her skin. The room had no windows, just four walls that trapped the stillness inside. Time blurred. She didn't know how long she'd been there, but her throat ached from thirst, and her stomach felt as if it had been empty for too long. No one had offered her water. No one had answered her repeated requests for a phone call. She pressed her lips together, glancing at the door. The same one Donovan and Richards had walked out of after telling her to sit. She had lost count of the minutes, the hours. They were isolating her, making sure she felt alone. When the door finally opened, Donovan strolled in first, followed by Richards. Their expressions had changed. The sharpness from before had softened, replaced by something else. Something practiced. Richards pulled a chair across from her and sat down. "We can make this go away," he said. His voice was smooth, steady. "All we need is a signature." Simone looked at the paper he slid toward her. A printed document, crisp and official looking. She didn't need to read every word to understand what it meant. An admission of guilt. Her fingers curled against her lap. "No." Richard sighed as if she were being difficult. "You sign this, and you walk away. No trial, no mess. Just sign, and we let you go." Simone shook her head. "I didn't do anything. I'm not signing that." Donovan rubbed his chin. That was the wrong choice. The door opened again. Two uniformed guards stepped inside. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. One moved behind her, the other to her side. A grip closed around her arm. Her chest tightened. This wasn't a routine interrogation anymore. This was something else. Something worse. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice sharper now, demanding an answer. No one replied. The guards let her out. The hallway stretched ahead, empty. The airport noise was gone. This part of the building was far from the public eye. Panic crawled up her throat. She wasn't sure where they were taking her, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not even close. The holding cell smelled of sweat and stale air. The walls were bare, the floors scuffed and cold. A single light buzzed overhead, casting weak illumination over the women huddled inside. Simone pressed her back against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees. No one spoke at first. The silence felt thick, too heavy to break. A girl beside her shifted, her hands gripping her elbows. Her face was pale, eyes darting toward the locked door every few seconds. "They're not taking us to court," she whispered. "They're taking us somewhere else." Simone turned her head. "What do you mean?" The girl swallowed before answering. "I heard them talking. Something about a shipment. We're part of it." A prickle ran through Simone's skin. "No," she said firmly. "They can't just take us. People will be looking for us." "Will they?" The girl's voice was barely audible. "No one knew I was coming here. No family. No one who'd ask questions." "What about you?" Simone wanted to say yes, that someone would come, that this was all a misunderstanding. But doubt pressed against her ribs. No one had let her make a call. No one had told her what would happen next. The door banged open. A guard stepped in. "Get up." No one moved at first. Then, slowly, one by one, they stood. Simone's muscles felt stiff as she rose to her feet. The guard gestured them forward. They filed out, moving down a corridor lined with locked doors. The air was thick with something unspoken. Fear, maybe, or the knowledge that none of them could change what was happening. A vehicle waited outside. The back doors were open, revealing rows of metal benches. Inside, Simone hesitated. The others stepped in ahead of her, shoulders hunched, eyes down. Elena, the girl from before, barely lifted her head. She climbed in. The door shut behind them with a final, heavy thud. The engine rumbled to life. No one told them where they were going. No one had to. The vehicle rolled to a stop. The doors opened, letting in a gust of air that smelled of fuel and metal. The guards barked orders, dragging the women out one by one. Simone's legs felt shaky as she stepped down onto cracked pavement. She took in her surroundings: tall steel fences, warehouses with no windows, and a sky that stretched above them, empty of any sign of help. She tried to resist, pulling against the grip on her arm, but the guard yanked her forward with ease. "Move!" They were herded through a heavy metal door, then separated. Simone fought as they dragged her into a small room, but a hand slammed her into a chair. Restraints clicked shut around her wrists before she could twist away. A man walked in, different from the guards. His suit was pressed, his watch expensive. He studied her, his gaze running over her like she was nothing more than a problem to solve. "You were supposed to be a simple case," he said, "but you're making too much trouble." Simone's breath came fast. "Who are you?" The man smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Not someone you get to ask questions." Understanding crashed into her like a weight. This wasn't about drugs. It had never been about that. She was never under arrest. She was being taken. Her chest tightened. She had to get out. Now. She forced herself to relax, letting her body slump forward as if she had no strength left. She barely moved when they unlocked the restraints, pretending she was too weak to fight. The guard loosened his grip, just slightly. It was all she needed. She slammed her elbow into his ribs, then kicked his knee with everything she had. He shouted in pain as she grabbed the key card clipped to his belt and ran. The hallway stretched ahead, too long, too exposed, but she sprinted anyway. Doors lined the walls, but there was no time to check them. Alarms blared, footsteps pounded behind her. She reached the door. The key card shook in her grip as she swiped it. A beep, a click, then the door swung open, revealing the outside. The speakers above crackled to life. A voice rang out, sharp and cold. "Prisoner 47 has escaped. Contain immediately." Simone didn't stop. She ran. Simone ran. The ground beneath her feet was uneven, roots and rocks threatening to trip her with every step. The night sky provided little light, making the trees around her seem endless. The distant sound of sirens faded, but she knew better than to slow down. They wouldn't stop looking for her. Branches toward her arms. Her breath came fast, but she pushed forward, forcing her legs to move. The pain in her side sharpened, but stopping wasn't an option. She had seen what they were capable of. If they caught her again, she wouldn't get another chance. A road. She had to find a road. She kept going until the trees thinned. A gas station stood ahead, its lone fluorescent light buzzing in the quiet. Simone staggered toward it, her hands gripping the edge of a rusted trash bin for support. A man behind the counter looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Please," she rasped. "Help me." Before he could answer, tires screeched outside. A black car rolled into the lot, its headlights sweeping over the building. Simone's heart pounded. She bolted through the back door, sprinting into the woods beyond the station. Footsteps thundered behind her, men shouting, flashlights cutting through the trees. She ducked low, crawling through a thicket, trying to stay hidden. A shadow moved to her right. Closer. Too close. She grabbed a loose rock and gripped it tight. When the man reached for her, she swung. He collapsed with a grunt. Simone snatched the weapon from his belt and ran again. The sky lightened. Dawn was coming. At the edge of the trees, a road stretched in both directions. A patrol car rolled by. She pressed herself against the trunk of a tree, heart hammering. Could she trust them? What if they were part of it? Then, headlights. A truck approached, the engine rumbling. Simone took a breath and threw herself into the road. Brakes screeched. The driver cursed, stepping out. "What the hell?" "Please," she gasped. "I need help." He hesitated, eyes scanning the road behind her. Then, with a sharp nod, he opened the passenger door. "Where to?" Simone climbed in, her hands shaking. "As far from here as possible." Days blurred into each other. Simone had barely slept, her body aching from exhaustion, her mind running in endless loops of fear. The truck driver had dropped her off near the university gates before sunrise, looking at her once more before pulling away. He hadn't asked for details, and she hadn't given any. Now, standing in front of the dormitory doors, she hesitated. The building loomed above her, familiar and foreign at the same time. The normal world had continued without her, students walking to class, laughing, living their lives like nothing had changed. But everything had changed for her. She climbed the steps, keeping her head down. Every face in the lobby made her skin prickle. Were they watching her? Waiting? Or was it just her paranoia? Inside her dorm room, she locked the door and pressed her forehead against the wood. She had made it. But for how long? That night, sleep came in fits. Every time her eyes shut, she saw the fences, the dark hallways, the man in the suit. She startled awake more than once, her body drenched in sweat. The silence of the room felt unnatural, like the calm before something worse. Then, just before dawn, something caught her eye. An envelope slid under her door. No footsteps, no voices, just the soft movement of paper against the floor. She stared at it, her breath caught in her chest. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she reached out and picked it up. Inside was a single note. "We know where you are.